carried dust across the quiet road leading to Ethan Walker's ranch when the wagon finally appeared over the hill. Ethan had been repairing a broken fence when he noticed it moving slowly along the trail. The wagon didn't belong to anyone he knew in the valley. That alone was enough to make him pause. Out here, strangers rarely arrive without reason. He leaned against the fence post and watched as the wagon creaked closer. The horse pulling it looked thin and tired, and the man driving it sat stiffly like someone who had traveled a long distance. When the wagon reached the gate, Ethan walked forward calmly. The driver climbed down and removed his hat. He was a large man with sharp eyes and a heavy coat dusted with road dirt. "You Ethan Walker?" the man asked. Ethan nodded once. "Who's asking?" The man gave a thin smile. "Name's Samuel Briggs. I was told you might be interested in an arrangement." Ethan frowned slightly. "What kind of arrangement?" Briggs turned and motioned toward the back of the wagon. "Come out," he said. A moment passed. Then a small figure slowly climbed down from the wagon. It was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 13. Her dress was simple and worn, and her dark hair hung loosely around a frightened face. She stood quietly beside the wagon, staring at the ground. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. He looked back at Briggs. "What is this?" The man folded his arms. "Mail order bride." Ethan's expression hardened instantly. "She's a child." Briggs shrugged. "Some ranchers prefer them young, easier to train." The words made Ethan's jaw clench. The girl finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm too young to be a wife." The sentence came out soft but steady. She lifted her eyes just long enough for Ethan to see the fear inside them. Then she lowered her gaze again. The wind moved across the dry grass between them. Ethan looked at Briggs again. "You bring her all the way out here thinking I'd buy a child?" Briggs gave a careless shrug. "You live alone. Plenty of ranchers pay good money for arrangements like this." Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping low. "You should leave." Briggs didn't move. "The girl needs somewhere to go," he said, "or I'll take her to the next ranch." Ethan knew exactly what that meant. He looked at the girl again. She stood still as stone, like someone who had already accepted whatever fate waited for her. Ethan turned away for a moment, staring across the wide, empty land of his ranch. He had spent 10 quiet years there since his wife died. The land had been silent ever since. He slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out a few folded bills. He shoved them into Briggs's hand. "Take your wagon and get off my land." Briggs counted the money quickly. A satisfied grin spread across his face. "Pleasure doing business with you." He climbed back onto the wagon without another word. The horse turned and began moving back down the trail. Within minutes, the wagon disappeared over the hill, leaving only dust behind. The girl remained standing near the gate. She looked confused, unsure what would happen next. Ethan walked toward her slowly. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "Anna." He nodded. "You hungry, Anna?" She gave a small, uncertain nod. "Come inside," he said. She followed him quietly into the ranch house. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and fresh coffee. The girl stopped near the doorway like she was afraid to step further. "You can sit," Ethan said. He placed a bowl of stew on the table. Anna stared at the food for a moment before carefully sitting down. She ate slowly at first, then faster as hunger took over. Ethan sat across from her but didn't eat. He simply watched the thin girl who had just been sold like a piece of property. After a few minutes, she looked up. "Why did you pay that man?" she asked softly. Ethan rested his arms on the table. "So he'd leave you here." Her eyes widened slightly. You still want me to be a wife?" The question carried fear. Ethan shook his head immediately. "No." Anna blinked. "Then why am I here?" Ethan looked around the quiet cabin, the empty chairs, the silent rooms that had once held laughter. "Because a 13-year-old girl shouldn't be handed to strangers." She stared at him, trying to understand. He continued, You'll stay here for now. Help around the house if you want. Anna lowered her gaze again. And later? Ethan leaned back slowly. Later we figure out where you belong. The girl seemed unsure whether to believe him, but something in his voice sounded different from the men she had met before. She finished the stew quietly. The sun was already setting outside when Ethan stood. I'll show you the spare room. He led her down the small hallway and opened a simple wooden door. A small bed stood by the window. Anna looked at it carefully. This is mine? She asked. For now, Ethan said. She stepped inside slowly like she was entering a place she didn't quite trust. Ethan turned to leave but stopped when she spoke again. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded once and closed the door softly behind her. That night the ranch felt different. For the first time in 10 years there were two sets of footsteps in the house. Ethan sat by the fireplace, staring into the flames. He knew the man who sold the girl might come back someday. Men like Briggs rarely forgot easy money. But Ethan had already made his decision. He would keep the girl safe as long as she stayed under his roof. And for the first time in many years, the quiet ranch no longer felt completely empty. Ethan sat beside the dying fire long after the night had settled over the valley. The wind outside brushed against the wooden walls, and for the first time in years he noticed how large and silent the house had been before tonight. Now there was another person under the roof. A small, frightened girl sleeping in the spare room. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing for certain. No one was taking her away again. Morning came slowly with pale sunlight creeping through the frost on the windows. Ethan woke before dawn, as he always did. He stepped outside and breathed in the cold mountain air. The ranch stretched across the valley, quiet and wide. The horses stood near the fence, waiting to be fed. After finishing the morning chores, Ethan returned to the cabin. He opened the door quietly. Anna was already awake. She sat at the table with her hands folded, looking unsure if she was allowed to touch anything. Morning, Ethan said. She looked up quickly. Good morning. He placed a loaf of bread and a jar of honey on the table. You can eat when you're hungry, he told her. Anna nodded but hesitated. I can help with work, she said softly. Ethan poured coffee into his cup. You don't have to work. She shook her head quickly. I want to. I don't want to be a burden. The words sounded older than a 13-year-old should speak. Ethan studied her for a moment. You can help with small things if you like. Feeding the chickens, gathering eggs. Anna's shoulders relaxed a little. I can do that. The days slowly began to form a routine. Anna helped with simple chores around the ranch. She fed the chickens, swept the porch, and sometimes watched Ethan repair tools or fences. At first she barely spoke. But over time the silence between them softened. One afternoon while they were fixing a broken gate, Anna finally asked something that had clearly been on her mind. Why did that man bring me so far away? Ethan tightened the bolt on the fence before answering. Because there are people who think children are something they can sell. Anna stared at the ground. My parents died last winter. After that, people started deciding things for me. Ethan didn't ask more. He had seen enough hardship in life to understand when someone carried too many memories already. But peace on the ranch didn't last forever. One evening, about 2 weeks later, Ethan spotted dust rising on the far road. A wagon approached from the same direction Briggs had come from. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He stepped onto the porch. Anna noticed the change in his expression. What's wrong? He kept watching the road. Stay inside. Her face turned pale. Is it that man? Ethan didn't answer. The wagon rolled closer until it stopped outside the gate. Samuel Briggs climbed down slowly, his greedy smile already waiting. Evening, Walker, he called. Ethan walked down from the porch, his boots crunching against the gravel. What do you want? Briggs leaned against the wagon casually. I've been thinking, I might have sold that girl too cheap. Ethan's voice became cold. You got paid. Now leave. Briggs shook his head. Not that simple. I got another buyer now. Man offering 3 times what you paid. Inside the cabin, Anna stood by the window listening, her heart pounding. Briggs continued talking. So I came back to collect my property. The word property made Ethan step forward slowly. She's not property. Briggs laughed. Law doesn't care much out here, cowboy. For a moment, the air between them grew heavy. Then Ethan spoke quietly, but firmly. You're not taking her. Briggs studied him carefully. You planning to shoot me over a girl that ain't even yours? Ethan didn't move. His hand rested calmly near the holster at his belt. I'm planning to protect someone who needs it. The 2 men stared at each other in silence. Finally, Briggs spat into the dirt. You'll regret this, he muttered. He climbed back onto the wagon and snapped the reins. The wagon rolled away again, disappearing into the fading light. But Ethan knew men like Briggs didn't give up easily. That night, Anna stepped outside slowly. Is he gone? Ethan nodded. For now. She looked down at her hands. I don't want trouble to follow you because of me. Ethan shook his head. Trouble already found you long before you came here. She looked up at him with uncertain eyes. Why are you helping me? For a moment, Ethan didn't answer. Then he said quietly, because someone should have helped you sooner. Winter slowly arrived across the valley. Snow covered the hills, and the ranch became quiet beneath white fields. Anna grew stronger and happier with each passing week. She laughed sometimes now, something Ethan had never heard before. One evening near Christmas, she placed a small wooden carving on the table. It was a clumsy little horse she had shaped with Ethan's old knife. For you, she said shyly. Ethan picked it up carefully. He hadn't received a gift in many years. Thank you, he said. Anna smiled softly. And as snow fell gently outside the cabin windows, Ethan realized something had changed forever. The ranch was no longer just a place where he lived alone. It had become a place where someone had finally found safety. And as long as he was there, Anna would never have to face the world alone again.